Hi, everyone. We're so grateful that you're attending this program, Next Generation Dissertations, New Projects for an Engaged Academy. I'm Teresa Mangum at the University of Iowa, where I direct a Mellon-funded grant on humanities for the public good. And in that role, I was lucky to meet Glenn Wright and also Katina Rogers, and to collaborate on thinking about what new dissertations could look like. We're really happy to be here, very happy for the Obermann Center for Advanced Studies at the University of Iowa to be part of this collaboration. And with that welcome, I'll turn things over to Glenn Wright.
Thanks so much, Teresa. Welcome, everybody. It's a special day for me to see this project coming to fruition in such spectacular style with our great turnout today and our fantastic crop of next generation dissertator participants that you're going to hear from shortly. I know that's what you all came for, so I'll be super brief, but I just want to quickly kind of indicate how this project came about and thank key contributors along the way. So let me point out, first of all, that this event enjoys live captioning. So if you would benefit from the captions, you can activate those from the bottom of your Zoom screen. And so this came about as a result of next gen dissertation, next gen PhD planning grant that the Syracuse University Graduate School and Humanities Center received from the NEH. Vivian May, director of the Syracuse Humanities Center, was my co-PI on that. And one of the four main projects that we undertook as a result of that grant focused on what we at the time were calling next non-monographic dissertations. The idea really being that, especially since the grant had as its kind of main point of reference career opportunities and opportunities for public engagement outside the academy, that the dissertation really represented an area where there was a lot of opportunity for increased legibility on in terms of the work that these PhD students were doing. I mean, if you're looking for a job outside the academy, or if your job is kind of oriented in a public-facing direction, that's your standard dissertation in the humanities still has some value insofar as it demonstrates that you're a capable researcher, you know how to do research independently on this kind of scale. And there's value in that, but it's not equivalent. For the most part, your standard monographic dissertation in the humanities is then not going to be a very legible product outside of the academy, and that represents a missed opportunity, not just for the dissertators, but for their graduate programs as well. So, with that in mind, we took on board this idea of constructing a toolkit. From the beginning, it was clear that it was going to be instantiated primarily as a website. And we really wanted two things from that. We wanted dissertators or people coming up to that point in their graduate career to, first of all, just have a sense that this was possible. And I think there's value in simply gathering together these very diverse non-monographic projects in one kind of virtual space for that reason alone. But also, we wanted it to be something that would be useful for them in terms of the decision-making process, like, do I really want to do this? And what is it going to require of me to be able to do it? And then kind of give them a sense of kind of breaking that formidable task down into manageable stages that they could then kind of see, well, this entire project is vast and I don't even know how to wrap my head around it, but I can do this one thing. And then once I do that, I can do this next thing. And before you know it, you know how to do it, just like you would know how to write a standard monographic dissertation. So that's what we were aiming for. Our planning group at the time, the ones who were focusing on this project, I just want to give props to them quickly. They consisted of Cal Alston, who is on the faculty here at SU, a philosopher of education and associate dean for academic affairs in the School of Education. Deborah Mannion, who's an English PhD and is an acquisitions editor at Syracuse University Press. Bob Searing, who is a history PhD student and is a curator at the Onondaga Historical Association in Syracuse. Matt Stewart, also a history PhD at Syracuse, and is now on the faculty at the Ambrose School in Meridian, Ohio. And Patrick Williams, who is our research librarian for humanities at the SU libraries here. So that's the group, and we did in fact succeed in the goal of planning this project over the course of the year. But of course, NEH had long since disposed of the implementation grant that was supposed to follow on from that. So there was a question about how we were going to make this happen. And we really made it happen primarily in the person of Chris Flanagan, who we were able to hire as a postdoc using our leftover NEH money plus some discretionary funds from the graduate school. And Chris really did the initial legwork. He and I did some of the initial interviews for this project and really kind of planned the architecture of the site to figure out how can we make it most useful so they can actually be user-friendly and accomplish those goals that I was talking about. However, Chris's postdoc came to an end. It was clear as we were nearing the end of his time with us that we needed to make a big push to get these projects through. So we brought on board Katina Rogers as a consultant, and that was really the key moment in terms of making this thing actually happen. So I mentioned that Chris, his time with us is up, but he did manage to do a couple of things beyond the next gen dissertation website, and I can't resist giving a plug for one of them, which is this book, Leaving the Grove, a Quitlit Reader. He and I edited this volume that just came out within the last month. It consolidates classics of the Quitlit genre along with a bunch of secondary essays discussing the phenomenon of Quitlit. So that's a major publication for Chris. It's great to see that come out along with the NMD, the non-monographic dissertation web project. That was, those were his two big accomplishments. So congratulations and thanks to Chris for all of his work. But bringing Katina on board was the key to making this happen. The second plug I'll give is just to her. We approached her at the time that she was transitioning from her former position at CUNY Graduate Center with Haystack and hanging out a shingle as a consultant in this field. So it was great that we were able to take advantage of that fact. She just had such a great intuitive grasp of what the project needed to be, kind of even in ways that Chris and I hadn't really thought through completely. She just understood intuitively and knew what this project wanted to be and did such a fantastic job with it. I'm extremely proud of it. And now, so that we can hear from some of our dissertators, I'm going to hand the imaginary reins to Katina Rogers.
Thank you, Glenn. This has been such a fun project to work on. I'm Katina Rogers. As Glenn mentioned, I have recently started my own consulting business called InkCap Consulting. And that's the context in which I've worked with the folks at Syracuse and also with Teresa and others at the University of Iowa through the Humanities for the Public Good program. And I have been working on dissertation related projects for a long time, over 10 years at this point, both at the Sloan Foundation, at Haystack, where one of the maybe the first event that I was a part of was about creative dissertations. And it's really exciting and enriching to see the ways in which this conversation is continuing and growing, and new voices are coming to the fore, while also seeing the ways in which some of the earlier projects have continued to really lead the way and provide an example for other folks looking to work differently. Hopefully you've already seen the website. I dropped a link into the chat. I'll drop another one in a moment for anyone who may have joined late. What I really want to say, just to get things started, is how much I love these conversations because the work is so good. It just brings me a lot of joy to hear the ways that people are letting their curiosity take reign. I think that having projects that push the boundary not only of content, but also of form is a way to really notice some of the assumptions that we might have about what we're trying to do through a dissertation and what we're trying to do through our humanities work. So I love all of the projects that you'll hear featured here today. The people who will be speaking are a total delight. We've got 4 dissertators and 2 advisors and 1 person, a faculty member from the University of Iowa, who will offer a brief response based on the work that she has been doing in the departments of Spanish and Portuguese at the University of Iowa. So I hope that you will all enjoy as well, just rekindling this spark of curiosity and insight and pleasure that I think can be a part of the best scholarship. So now each of our speakers are going to introduce themselves. They'll have 5 minutes to talk a little bit about their project. I'll just call on each of you. And for those of you who have an advisor here with you today, I'll call on you sequentially so that you can talk about your work together. Justin, would you mind leading us off? Justin Schell.
Yeah, thanks, Katina. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Cool. So yeah, as Katina mentioned, I'm Justin Schell. I did my PhD and graduated in 2013 at the University of Minnesota's Comparative Studies in Discourse and Society program. My advisor, Robin Brown, shares his regrets that he can't be here today, but he was instrumental in actually making this thing happen. So my project came out of research with different immigrant and refugee and diasporic hip hop communities in the Twin Cities. Lots of people know that there is, well, maybe not lots of people, but a fair amount of people know that there's a thriving independent hip hop community within the Twin Cities. And then other communities know that there are lots of immigrant and refugee and diasporic communities. And I was really interested in how those two overlapped. And so started off doing a lot of, recording shows, writing articles, things like that. Got a camera in my hand, and then I was like, I want to make a documentary because that's what you do. And then that turned into like, well, why can't I have video and audio as part of this dissertation that I'm writing? And so that was sort of the impetus for that, and then figuring out how I could actually do that. And so I'll share my screen briefly. And so this is what the dissertation turned out to be. And I think Katina's putting links to both of these in the chat. And so it is not super fancy. It is a Google site that they have to keep updated over the years as things break, which we can talk about when we talk about the digital preservation aspect of this. And so the eventual project, overall project, focused on 3 artists, one who is conventionally from Ghana, one who is conventionally from sort of Puerto Rico, and one who is conventionally from Thailand. And I say conventionally because the whole project like troubles the notion of being conventionally from one place when you are always between multiple places, but also multiple narratives of belonging. And so after 2 trips to Ghana with the Artist Manifest, I realized I had more than enough material to write just on that, and also in the interest of being done and not having a 1,000-page dissertation. That was the impetus. So the project has a variety of images and videos and things like that from throughout the project, some clips from other things. And these were hosted at a digital content library because at Minnesota, because the university repository couldn't do embedded audio or video at that time. And so just navigating through some of these as well. And just going through each different chapter, for it, and then finished that in 2013. And then the documentary was finished 2 years later, because one thing at a time. And you can see that for free at the website, and both HD and SD versions for people who might have slower connections in different parts of the world from where we were working. So the research involved 2 trips to Ghana, a trip to Puerto Rico, and a trip to northern Thailand with each of these artists, and looking at how they connected with other musicians, both there and here, sometimes from their background, sometimes not. They all had really fantastic family stories and connections, some of whom were musical, some who weren't. And so to be able to examine these different ways of belonging and home and the things that made up their homes and how they expressed that in their music. And so from this initial impulse of why can't I have music playing with this when we have websites now, and so then navigating all of the bureaucracies of the graduate school and figuring out how to actually make this thing happen. So if you look at the PDF version of this, which is what I put into the repository, it's just got little play triangles for every piece of media because they didn't know what to do with it. So I'm sure we'll talk more about that and actually figuring out how to do that. But yeah, that's the project, and I'm looking forward to chatting with y'all about that over the next hour and a half or so. Thanks.
Thank you, Justin. There's so many good questions wrapped up in that around conservation and university processes, scope, I think also, and skills. So we'll talk about all of that during the Q&A, but the project is fantastic. Sonia Estima, would you mind going next? And then your advisor can speak after you if that's okay.
Yes, hello, can you hear me? Hi, everyone. My name is Sonia Estima, and I got my doctoral dissertation at University of Illinois, and Dr. Mary Kalansis is here on the call with us today. And my inspiration to try to compose a multimodal dissertation came from the book by Nick Susanna's Unflattening. And when I read the book, I was moved to tears. The whole premise of really questioning writing and the supremacy of writing in academic writing, in questioning why should that be, and does it have to be, and what else can we do, how else can we think about dissertation. In that whole process of going through his dissertation really led me to be inspired to want to do something that included other than just text, and to try to produce a multimodal dissertation. Unfortunately for me, I'm not an artist, and I don't know anything about drawing or even video production. So I proposed to Dr. Mary Kalansis and Dr. Bill Cope, my advisors, that I wanted to produce a multimodal dissertation, and they were extremely supportive from the get-go. So I know one of the questions later will be about defending your project, and to that degree, I had already been accepted before I even started. So my idea was accepted even before I even know what I wanted to do. And so I began to investigate the process of dissertation writing. So my dissertation is about writing multimodal dissertations. And I think, let's see if I can share the screen. Let's see, will that work? For some strange reason, when I try to share my screen, it hijacks my microphone. So it's either or. I can either talk about it or I can share it or show it to you. But basically, I started to want to look at the process of writing a multimodal dissertation. And in the end, I ended up doing a case study with 4 cases, and on the call here with us is Justin Schell, and he was one of the cases that I looked at in the process of writing my dissertation. And I interviewed each one. And so in the end, to some degree, the final product that I produced is to some degree similar to what Justin Schell did, which is text and video juxtaposed in following each other. So for each of the cases and for each of the points and for each of the ideas that I wanted to bring up, I used videos. I have a few videos of myself speaking, and then I also have videos of the interviewees, both of the dissertation writers as well as their advisors, and sharing their experience. And then in addition, when I talk about the theories and when I talk about other samples of dissertations, I tried to, as much as I could, to incorporate other videos so that you can see the product, not just read me describing what I did or what I'm talking about, but to actually hear the speakers, to actually hear the voice of each individual in the process of reading through it. And I'm trying to type and speak at the same time. I'm just putting it in the chat. The website is just myname.com. If you're curious, you can take a look at the dissertation. And then the process for me, along with Justin was saying, and then I don't want to go too much into the individual questions we'll be discussing later, but the difficulties of trying to produce something. And in my case, produce something that I am at the same time studying. So trying to study multimodality, trying to study the value in the process and how to both the why and the how to produce a multimodal dissertation, and then at the same time try to make my dissertation multimodal. And also video production was absolutely not part of my repertoire, so having to learn how to work with video and at the same time use video as the final product. So at the end, I have to say my dissertation turned out to be quite different from what I had envisioned, what it would or might be in the beginning, but I think that's perhaps the case for everyone as you go through the process. What you end up producing turns out to be quite different from what you thought it might be. But the process was completely, I know you'll ask us later, would you do it differently? And I think the answer would be absolutely not. If I had to do it over again, I would want to do the same thing. Hopefully it would be better the second time around, but absolutely, I thought the process was invaluable. And I am now a big advocate for multimodality, and especially trying to create this impetus for multimodality in academic writing. And I know Justin was talking about creating the PDF file, and then all you have is this image, and then you add the link at the bottom. If somebody wants to go, you have to go click and go to YouTube or go to the website where you can watch the video, versus being able to play the video and read the text on the page at the same time. So talking about all these what the technology affords us to do today versus what most academic journals are still expecting to see. So that's a big question for me that I am now working with and working through. And I think we're going to invite Dr. Kalansis to speak.
Yes, please. Thank you so much, Sonia. It's really great to hear about your project. And I think the question of flexibility is one I'd love to return to in a moment. Mary Kalansis, would you like to introduce yourself? And if there's anything else you'd like to add to what Sonia has said, you're welcome to.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I want to heartily congratulate the next generation dissertation team, all of you. It's just music to my ears that there is such a group and you're doing that kind of work. Anyone who knows my work knows that multimodality, multiliteracies, that's what I teach, that's what I research, that's what I do. And to have a student like Sonia, who was interested in meaning making, you know, she was preparing people to go into war zones, to learn a language quickly, and she was wondering how multimodality, how the affordances of the digital will enable her to do that. But in order to understand that, she wanted to create a thesis that tested those tools, right? How do you communicate? How do you make meaning? Harnessing the affordances of the digital, and what kind of power do they have? So the work that she did was absolutely fantastic. The issue for us was, how do you prepare examiners? Like, we supported her fully, but how do you support other people in the academy to understand that the future of meaning making now, as a consequence of the affordances of digital, will be multimodal? And we need to prepare our students. In fact, all our students in our doctoral program have to use multimodality as part of their learning journey, right? In figuring out what these resources can do for meaning making. Because in the end, that's what we're all on about. How do you make impactful meaning? And it's not an either or. You know, it's from alphabetical literacy at one end to, you know, visuals and audio at the other end. It's moving our students across that spectrum. And Sonia moved across it beautifully. And she was a model, a warrior, in fact, struggling with something that she believed in but wanted to prove. And in the end, she was able to prove that she did something that had rigor, that had was scholarly, very deep and sound, and made a difference. And the fact that you've selected her to be here today is evidence of the degree to which such effort is now being recognized as really important. So thank you to Sonia for being such a wonderful, adventurous doctoral student. And thank you to the Next Generation Dissertations group for disseminating the possibilities that are out there. You are also warriors, and I salute you.
Well, many, many thanks to you also for being here. One of the things that Glenn in particular held strongly to was the importance of having not only the people who have created their dissertations in these ways, but their advisors as well. I mean, I think that so often we hear about challenges, and we don't often get a chance to hear from the people who have been helping to guide and mentor, who have been navigating some of those institutional challenges as well. So thank you very much for joining us. We have another pair of dissertation creator and advisor who are here with us today, Jesse Morandy and Matt Gold. Jesse, do you want to introduce your project?
Yeah, sure. Thanks again, everyone, for having us. Glenn, great to see you. And Katina, as always, great to see you. And so many others I'm seeing on this, many pages of faces that I know. So welcome to everybody. My name is Jesse Merandy. I'm the Director of Digital Humanities and Digital Exhibitions at Bard Graduate Center here in New York City. For my dissertation, which I completed at CUNY Graduate Center, I worked on what I call the location-based mobile experience. And essentially, I was striving to solve this question about how we could make writers more approachable and make personal connections to the works of literature that we would be reading in my English program. As somebody who's interested in that concept as an educator and somebody who was interested in it for my own kind of process of discovery, I looked for ways that I thought I could make those connections. And one of the things that kept pulling me was this use of place and the use of mobile, any kind of mobile device to bring you to places. So I focused my dissertation on Walt Whitman, and the project I came up with was a very explorative one called Vanishing Leaves. And I posted in the chat here some links to my project site and to my white paper, which came out of this, so that you guys can peruse that at your own leisure. But essentially, I used the geolocation capabilities and high-speed internet capabilities of modern mobile devices as a way to bring users through an app called Eris, which was developed at the University of Wisconsin in Madison by David Gagnon and his team there in the Field Day Labs. And what I did was use that app to build a experience where users were taken to Brooklyn Heights to learn about Walt Whitman, his writing, and learn about the neighborhood where he worked and lived and wrote the first edition of Leaves of Grass. So I'll just quickly share one of the screens here, although you are all free just to take a look. This was the game site, which I built as a companion site, which contained information on how to use the mobile app, how to download it, but also contained a lot of the scholarly information. I had to do recording of audio for this. Essentially, as you moved around from location to location through the app's interface, you were guided to move to different locations. And when you reached those locations, you would dialogue with game characters who would give you information and help you to move to the next location, and also prompt you to undertake writing assignments, little small composing assignments at place. So the hope was to ground the knowledge in these places using mobile devices, and to give users a way to connect to those writers through those experiences they were having, and think about the similarities and differences. There really was no other way I could think of to create this experience other than doing this non-traditional, using non-traditional methods, because it was, for me, the most important part was driving to this experiential aspect of learning. And so I really felt like I really felt it was a difficult prospect to try to put this into a more traditional monograph. And it was also difficult to kind of figure out a way to make this happen until I found Amanda Visconti's really spectacular project, her Ulysses project, which I'll urge you to also take a look at. And through discussions with Matt Gold, my advisor, who will speak shortly. And so there was some connections. I started to put together a plan and where I knew that I had to try something different. It was really, my experiences coming from a background of web development and working and doing a lot of web-based projects in the past, combining my skills with my interests and the support I had, it really became like the path revealed itself, I would say. And so I'm really excited to share this project, and hopefully, as Whitman had said and wrote to the poets to come, I really feel like this project is for, you know, the next generation of scholars. So the alignment with this project was perfect. And once again, thank you so much for including me in it.
Thank you so much, Jesse.
Stop screen sharing.
That's such a fantastic project. And I can see in the chat that there's some folks who are interested in digital games in particular. So that'll be really great for the discussion later. Matt, do you want to introduce yourself and just say a little bit more about the CUNY context and the advisory context for this?
Sure, thank you. First, I just want to thank the Next Generation team for having us here today, and to all the attendees for coming. My name is Matt Gold. I'm a faculty member in English and Digital Humanities at the CUNY Graduate Center in New York City. And yeah, I had the privilege of working with Jesse on this amazing project, you know, which I think in preparation for this event, I started looking back at our previous correspondence, at, you know, prospectus reviews and all of that. And, you know, I think Sonia mentioned that her project ended up in a very different place where it began. Jesse's project began, I think, with what eventually became the mobile game. It was like one chapter in the prospectus, and it wound up taking over the whole thing. And Jesse really did kind of find his way there. What I think I want to emphasize is that the project that he wound up with in some ways is extremely experimental, an augmented reality mobile game taking the form that involves a lot of kind of creative elements, serving as a kind of critical dissertation. But it really came so much out of the roots of what Jesse was studying at the time. So his orals lists were on comp ret, on mobile writing, on eco-poetics and thinking about place, and on digital humanities and kind of creating digital projects. And as he said, it really, this dissertation brought together all three of those areas in such an amazing way. And it's really, you know, in some ways, I'm sure we'll talk about this as we go on, but, you know, there's so much work and labor that goes into these projects. And I saw that with Jesse, and I'm sure I don't know how he'll feel about talking about it, but there was so much he did to make this happen on so many different intellectual and programming levels. But what he achieved, I think, is really important as an instance of what a dissertation could look like. And I just want to close out my brief introduction by saying, Jesse, at the time when we were looking and I was trying to show him people who were doing interesting things with their dissertations, you know, I did point him to Amanda's work because at the time it was one of the first really important digital dissertation projects. And what she did that was so important was not just to share her project, but share her process and her documentation and how she kind of got there. And I think that the wonderful thing about what we have here today and through the Next Generation Dissertation website is that we have so many more models out there for others to follow. And it's exciting to think about what will come as we move forward.
Thank you so much, Matt. I was typing in the chat and realized I could just say it out loud, but I just wanted to echo what you're saying about Amanda's work in particular. I have pointed so many times to the documentation that they put together. It's an incredible service to anyone who is undertaking something, even if the format is very, very different, even if you're at a different institution. Amanda's work is a great place to start because they did so much work in documenting each step along the way, the hurdles that they were facing and so on. So definitely that's something to check out if you're someone who's working on a project right now. We have one more fantastic project to introduce. Kay Sohini, if you could introduce yourself and your work. Kay is still in the thick of things, so I'm really excited to hear from someone who is at the tail end of this project, of this process now, and will be defending very soon. Kay, go ahead.
Just gonna share my screen. Can you see that? Great. My name is Kay Sohini, and I'm a final year PhD candidate at Stony Brook University. Where I just finished drawing my doctoral dissertation, and I'm supposed to defend in like a few weeks right now. So I use comics to, let me just see if I can just move things around a little bit. Okay. So I use comics to draw attention to systemic and interconnected issues pertaining to race, gender, disability, and environmental inequality. I started drawing comics seriously only about 3 to 4 years back. I used to be a drawer as a kid, but I had this teacher who was more interested in teaching me how to imitate paintings than in teaching me how to draw. So like it just made me lose interest very quickly. And drawing comics, let alone kind of like drawing comics in an academic setting, it didn't really occur to me before I encountered Nexus Analysis Unflattening, which also started as a doctoral dissertation, as Sonia mentioned. The first time I read about unflattening was probably sometime in 2015, 2016, and the very concept of comics as a method to think in and to communicate with was really interesting to me. Moreover, the medium of comics was important to me for 2 key reasons. Firstly, the more I thought about how comics appeal to social justice, how they accommodate narratives by people who have been historically pushed to the margins, and how they help readers reconsider social biases about gendered, racial, or cultural others, the more I was compelled to think about modes of production. So I figured that if I wanted to write about comics as literatures of resistance, I needed to ask questions about accessibility and readability. And also, as a woman of color and an immigrant working in this format, not only kind of like enabled me to combine my socio-ethical obligations with my scholarship, but it also allowed me to do so in a format that was materially and qualitatively accessible. But really, it was not before I started actually drawing did I realize exactly how generative the comics medium was for me. When I wrote this chapter, Breathless, which focused on how environmental sustainability is a disability and racial justice issue, I figured out that I can combine creative data visualization with narrative. An excerpt from this chapter was recently published in the NIB, so you can read it online here. But to give you some examples of what this looks like in practice, using the visual interface of the medium, I tried to show how disparities in New York's infrastructure. For example, when the tropical storm Elsa passed through New York, it flooded parts of the city. It was very jarring to see how subways in the area lying between Washington Heights, which is usually lower income than the citywide medium, and it's predominantly Black, were submerged in waist deep water, whereas the subway stops in Upper East Side, like the Lexington 63rd, which actually has like a significantly lower elevation than the Heights, were just fine and not waterlogged at all. So this points to a major discrepancy in infrastructure based on demographic that I was trying to point out using this kind of data visualization. Another example is pertaining to the water crisis currently unfolding in the Lake Mead, which is the largest reservoir in the United States. And as of 2021, the federal government has issued the first ever water crisis alert on the Colorado River. So in this visualization, I try to explain how Lake Mead was last considered full all the way back in 1983, and how the current deficit is as high as the Statue of Liberty without its base. And then with the help of these isometric cubes, I try to explain the effect the water shortage will have on people in Arizona, California, Nevada, who depend on it for electricity, water, and farmers who depend on it for irrigating 5.5 million acres of land, as well as the adverse impact it will have on wildlife in the area. Yeah, so I also kind of like use this creative data visualization to show increase in heat waves, droughts, wildfires, to make a case for how climate action beyond minor individual adjustments that cannot possibly offset global emissions sufficiently. And apart from climate change related data visualizations, I also make a case for how comics are well suited to creating and engaging public discourse on these pressing issues by citing the increasing popularity of comics, both in terms of the market size as well as cultural recognition, as can be inferred from the National Book Awards, the MacArthurs, and so on and so forth, that comics has won over the last couple of decades. Yeah, and I'll just wrap up with a short piece I did on the affordances of comics using the DeLuca effect, where essentially several moments of time are compressed into like a single image. So I use the effect here to explore the possibilities of the medium in graphic medicine, in autobiographies and documentary, and in scholarly communication, amongst other uses. Yeah, so that's it. That's all from my end. I think time's nearly up. So thank you for listening.
This is so fabulous, Kay, and I am really excited to hear about how your defense goes. Kay's advisor, Lisa Diedrich, couldn't be here with us today, but she did send some responses to me over email, and I just want to read a couple of sentences out of that because one of the things that has really struck me in speaking with folks advisors is how much support and enthusiasm there is for your work. I mean, everybody who's here, your advisors, I can tell, have just adored your work. And it's been really interesting for me to see the ways in which faculty advisors and members of committees are learning from you all as graduate students as well. I think that's a really beautiful part of the process. But one thing that Lisa Diedrich said was, she was talking about the ways in which you hadn't started, Kay, as you hadn't started in on this as intending to do a graphic work. And Lisa says, she was drawn to the form quite literally. She began to draw and include her own drawings as part of her analysis. Soon enough, the comics medium became both object and mode of analysis. As Kay turned to comics as method, the transformation of her analysis was remarkable. As she began thinking in comics, her project became something new and different. And I wanted to highlight that because I think that that's something that's really significant, that the forms in which we are working change the ways that we're thinking. And so for each of you who have decided to work in a particular way, one of the things I'm really curious to hear about is, what unfolded that might not have unfolded if you had been working purely in text or in a more traditional analytic format. Before we shift into more of a cross discussion, I've invited Ana Rodriguez from the University of Iowa to offer a brief response. Ana, I'd love to hear from you what you think about these projects that you've heard, the different perspectives from different institutions and different types of projects based on what you've also been working on at the University of Iowa. Can you introduce yourself? Mm-hmm.
Oh, sure. My name is Ana Rodriguez. I am an associate professor in the Department of Spanish and Portuguese at the University of Iowa, and I was DGS of my department for 3 years, which is when we went through the process of revising our PhD, which included opening up the options for the dissertation. So what I would like to share today with you is just some thoughts about what motivated these changes to our program, and also some of the lessons that we learned throughout the process. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I think that humanities scholars pride ourselves when we know we're contributing to solving complex issues, making a difference on how humans understand themselves and the world surrounding them, bringing clarity to the intricacies of history, literature, languages, religion, art. I believe that an essential part of creating and disseminating this knowledge includes a responsibility to listen to what the world needs and to translate our knowledge in ways that are accessible to the wider possible audience. This is particularly urgent now, amid the perception of higher education institutions as removed from the realities of everyday Americans, with all the negative consequences that entails at so many different levels. We need to communicate loud and clear that our work has a public impact. But to be able to say so with full honesty, we need to make sure that that research does have a public impact. And for it to do so, we need to adapt to ways that facilitate the dissemination of that research and that highlight its engaged quality. That sounds great as an abstract idea, but what happens when this change is suggested in institutions and to scholars who too often still assess the value of this work using very conservative processes and outcome assessment techniques? Many times, the reaction is skepticism, reluctance, sometimes even hostile resistance, especially when the dissertation comes into discussion. My experience after revising our PhD in Hispanic literatures is that the dissertation is still a very torn topic when discussing graduate program reform, as if touching the dissertation would cause the collapse of the PhD as we know it. But that is the actual point. Is the current humanities PhD untouchable? Is the way we have been doing things for decades the only viable way? Can we envision something different without entering a PhD identity crisis, or more accurately, I think sometimes a faculty role identity crisis? What would happen if we thought together of possible different models for what a good dissertation is? What and who are we alienating if we do not diversify the options for a dissertation? How can we emphasize the relevance of teaching, of having real impact on societal values, exploring new kinds of knowledge, promoting a more democratic dissemination of that knowledge, working for the public and not only for personal advancement, opening conversations and discussions beyond the field specialists? If we believe in a PhD that touches on all these elements, we need to be open to change and to keep learning. We need to keep learning, to keep adding new skills to our own knowledge, asking for collaboration to fill our own voids with humility and with generosity. Most of us have not been trained to help students who want to work on projects like this beyond the traditional monograph or peer-reviewed article. So we definitely need to move out of our comfort zone to be part of this change. And we will be more successful if we work in teams, reconsidering the ingrained concept of the sole God-like advisor and substituting it when needed by an advisory team that incorporates many different specializations, talents, approaches, perspectives to better serve multifaceted and innovative dissertations like the ones we have just learned about today. We are doing our students a disservice if we're not serious about the PhD and a dissertation in tune with what the world needs from the humanities. And I am not talking only about increasing students' chances of getting a job after graduation, either in the academy or outside the academy, but I'm also talking about helping them find their passion, their purpose in life, while simultaneously being a role model of what higher education can do for everyone. Do we want to contribute to eliminating barriers to excellent scholarship and teaching, or do we want to be the outdated gatekeeper who only values reproductive knowledge and processes with the same criteria that have been in place for generations? Do we want to renew the relevance of the humanities PhD in the 21st century, valuing projects done with rigor, with brilliance, originality, complexity, but in ways that are compelling for a wider audience and that create a space for a more diverse pool of voices? If we're really serious about diversifying higher education, especially graduate programs and faculty and university leadership composition, we must implement policies and processes that are not hostile to prospective graduate students and faculty who will not thrive if we keep doing the same things we have been doing for generations with not so great results in terms of real, effective, and sustainable diversity, equity, and inclusion. Change is hard. I learned that very clearly during the process in my department. Change is very hard. And this change requires a lot of soul searching, both individually and collectively. It requires many difficult conversations at the departmental and institutional level. It requires generosity, a will to compromise, open-mindedness, creativity, passion, risk-taking, and courage, lots of courage. Historically, that is how the greatest academic breakthroughs have happened, when courageous individuals and teams were able to think creatively, took risks, and got out of their comfort zone. We, as humanities scholars, have a responsibility to keep up with a world that needs a new type of knowledge production and dissemination, not only in our own research, but especially in our training of the next generation. This next generation does not have to be exactly like us. We do not need to help them become our academic mini-me's. Actually, the best teachers, I believe, aim at helping their students be better and do better than them. And that is what should motivate us while we look at our graduate programs, including dissertations. What will it take to prepare our PhD students to be better than us, to impact the world, to make our disciplines more visible, to embrace real diversity, to have successful and fulfilling careers and lives? It's not an easy track, sorry, it's not an easy task, but again, we're not alone. We're a team and we have the humanities on our side. So we're in the best possible company to do this. Now we just have to go ahead and do it. And those are my thoughts. Thank you so much.
I think that was the most encouraging conversation about dissertations I've ever heard. I love hearing this kind of enthusiasm, particularly from someone who's engaged in doing the really hard work of changing curricula and changing departmental structures. It does not happen quickly, and it takes a lot of persistence, and it does take a lot of courage, as you said. So thank you so much for joining us, Anna, and for sharing that with us. I'd like to now shift into some discussion. I have a bunch of questions that I'd love to ask the group, but I'm also going to welcome everybody who's here with us today to feel free to add questions to the chat. I'll open it up more directly for participant Q&A in a few minutes after we spend a bit of time talking, but feel free to start writing questions in the chat and we'll get to those as we can. Also, I want to offer a quick round of applause to everybody for keeping so close to time. We have so many people and everyone did a really great job. So thank you all for staying so focused and for allowing us time for this discussion. So I want to start with a broad question, which is something that I hinted at when I was responding to Kay's dissertation, which is, how did this project influence your thinking? And I'm speaking specifically about format, but also the process of figuring out, what a dissertation project would look like in this format, figuring out what skills you needed, how you were going to scope it. What were some unexpected insights that emerged either in the content of your scholarship or in terms of your own path because of this specific project that you have worked on?
I mean, I can start if that's okay.
Please.
For me, using comics as a medium kind of like allowed me to shift my focus from talking about what comics can do to actually doing the thing, which was very rewarding for me. Especially, it pushed me to expand the boundaries of the medium with questions like, how can we use the spatiotemporal innovations enabled by comics to actually map climate change and its intersections? That's one of the major questions I was dealing with. And also considering the medium's history in political coloring, how can comics contribute to a visual culture that mitigates harm in a socio-political climate that actively disenfranchises minorities? And the other question that it made me think about, just working in the media made me think about, was considering the, like how do we utilize the visually compelling and effective nature of comics to appeal to social justice and most importantly, perhaps resist disinformation. So yeah, it just led me to those questions. And I feel like if I was not working in this medium, I wouldn't have found those questions.
That's amazing. Thank you. Jesse, I see your hands up too.
I think for me, one of the most interesting things is what I would call like a digital humanities feedback loop, which essentially was the making of the project continually pushed me to new areas of research. So for instance, like going out into the field to research the locations and just to be at those places in Brooklyn Heights to understand, how to build a walking tour, for instance, so that people were safe, that they could do a path that was not too strenuous over the period of time. But every time I went out, I would come back with new knowledge, which I'd have to research and I'd have to dive into. So just the building and the process of building would continue to inform the research I was doing. And then the research would push me back out into the field again. So really the making was so instrumental in pushing the thinking about how to do pedagogy with mobile devices, something that there was minimal literature about. I mean, there's scattered articles and people have written some great stuff about it, but applying it so directly to the study of literature, it really meant I had to go do the thing. So it was, for me, really that kind of like the making made the project. Otherwise, a lot of those, little elements would have been left on the table. So I was grateful for the project for that. Definitely, yeah.
Katina, can I?
Yes, please go ahead.
Say something. I want to emphasize this thing about meaning making, the possibilities of multimodal for meaning making. And a little example is in Abu Ghraib, the prison, the Red Cross had written a tome in perfect alphabetical English that was on the internet available to anybody. But it took somebody with a camera going in there and taking a picture of the man with the hood and all the wires before the world exploded and responded. So different modes have different impact. And Kate has demonstrated, was it? Beautifully, because the climate issues, her drawings, her images speak so powerfully to the issues that she wanted. If she'd written it all in alphabetical literacy, maybe so they would have got it, maybe they wouldn't. But it's each mode has a different power to make a difference. And I think Anna was right. It was wonderful to hear her speak that we have to prepare our learners to understand the power. Alphabetical literacy, was the gold standard, but whether you're in medicine, architecture, anywhere, making meaning now that's impactful needs to use multimodality. And it's really easy because you click and you get the alphabet, you click and you get a sound, you click, the affordances are there, but we haven't brought them into the academy, as Anna has quite rightly said, and prepared all learners need to make meaning using the affordances of what's out there. Even the literate president uses few words to impact the whole world in a Twitter form. Well, more powerful than him having written a book, that's for sure, or even a dissertation. So I think it's not about fun or creativity, it's a necessity because the affordances are there and the academy has not shifted to making meaning systematically and preparing people, as Anna said beautifully, to enable our learners to make impactful meaning in the academy and beyond that.
Well, and I really love the specificity of alphabetical literacy because it just underscores that when I typically say literacy, I'm assuming something, and there are many, many, many kinds of literacies. Right. So that's fabulous. And I'm really glad to have folks from a School of Ed here. I think that broadens our discussion in a really beautiful way. Sonia and Justin, I see your hands up. I'm also going to go ahead, just for everybody's clarity, I'm going to spotlight the folks who are speakers so that we can see you all on the screen. So you may start seeing people move around on your screens, but that's just me. Sonia, go ahead, and then Justin.
Yeah, just to comment on this idea without trying to repeat what everybody already said, but from the perspective of the one trying to write this multimodal dissertation and going through the process, and in the process of writing the dissertation, questioning what is it that I'm trying to do and what does the video do to the writing, and what does the writing do to the video, and how do they coexist, and what does one do? So why should I include writing versus video, and when and how? So those were all the questions that I was asking myself. And what does the video do that you cannot do just in writing, or could you? So I could probably have written the entire dissertation in just in text form. But then when you add the video of the individual speaking, what does that do? And what kind of language do you use? What kind of language then is appropriate? And then we go into the question of reach. Who is going to read? How many people typically would read a traditional monographic dissertation versus what kind of reach do you have once you start incorporating other modalities, and once you start incorporating comics, or once you start incorporating videos. And now the message becomes available to a much wider audience who might typically not be consuming this type of product. And so now my work, I have become much more passionate about being academically involved after I wrote my dissertation in dealing through and with the topic, and now trying to promote this idea to other colleagues. I work in teacher professional development, and so trying now to engage other teachers to do the same thing. And just this morning, a colleague asked if they could write their teacher action research using video, and my answer is yes, absolutely, I would love to see it. But then asking the big questions of what does that look like, what should it look like? So does just any video count? What does that look like? So then going into the advisor mode to really have rubrics and have models that we can follow to then understand how we can still be academically sound and have the rigor that we're looking for, and yet be accessible and have the reach of those that we're trying to communicate with.
Rigor, such a loaded word. There's a really interesting question in the chat from Lisa Rodi about logic. And Lisa, let's come back to that in just a minute. Justin, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the lineages of this project I mentioned before was like, you know, I don't want to have a CD in the back of a book or something where, you know, it has to be divorced from it. But it's also like, I mean, with all music, it's like this, but I think it was especially with hip hop, and you lose so much if you're just transcribing lyrics and you just put those on the page. You lose intonation, you lose all like these like verbal sampling cues and all these kinds of things. But another aspect of this was around accessibility and multimodality. And I was working on a paper on a hip hop artist from Minneapolis, Brother Ali, who's legally blind, and so he doesn't read much. And so I wanted to, you know, working on a paper on him, and I was like, yeah, see what you think. And so I was like, well, he doesn't read well. I can't see the paper that well. So I recorded myself reading it. I was like, I'm not going to try to rap like him. That's going to be really bad, and no one wants to hear that. And so putting the music in was a way to make that more accessible. And so I often, when I would do workshops on multimodal scholarship, I would pair it with accessibility to have people think about, okay, what other ways could you do this? And what other avenues does it open up besides just like, oh, you need to do this to make, just like, you need to have a transcript for your podcast, or you need to, you know, have audio description of a video or things like that. But what are some ways that you can expand not just the audience, but that sort of interaction between the different modalities as part of it?
Fantastic, thank you. I've got my own questions in my pocket, but there's also some great questions coming in the chat. Lisa, do you want to ask your question about affect and logic? Do you mind, if you don't want to voice it to the group, just say the word and I'll read it out loud.
No, that's okay. Sorry, I'm
okay,
just,
cool, thanks. No worries.
Happy. Thank you. So I guess my question here is, you know, so many of the presenters talk about the way that affect kind of enters into the work, whether it be through drawing, through music, through gameplay. And so it makes me think that maybe one of the challenges here when we're talking about evaluating in this sort of final product of the doctoral degree is that we imagine it to be a purely logical document, that it has to be really, you know, abstracted from any kind of affect, but these different projects bring affect to bear on the sort of topic through multi-sensorial, multimodal means. And so I'm wondering if it means that we really have to change our way of thinking about knowledge as being able to negotiate and make use of, productive use of affect and its sort of relationship to logic, and whether or not you would agree with that, or if you felt that, you know, that maybe that it can remain this sort of purely logical document, or if it's, you know, if there's anything there, basically.
You know, logic, the Greek word logo, meant words, but logic is not restricted to words. You know, a documentary has logic, a picture has logic, or music has logic. So it's really expanding all those classical kind of terms that we use, Lisa. I mean, it's a good point, but you know, it's the problem is with understanding logic only linked to symbolic or alphabetical text. Before we had that, humans made logic. Before the invention of the book and writing, people had logic. They lived their world. They negotiated. Then we invented, you know, the book, and everything shrunk around it. It closed around it, and it left people out. You know, it became a gatekeeper of logic and knowledge. And what we need to do is blow that apart in the academy, because that's not how meaning and power react. Sorry, I'm so passionate about it, but
no, not at all. And I think one question that I still have with that is, you know, no matter how we are thinking about how logic is constructed, is it antithetical to how we think of affect? And does affect have space? Matt, I saw your hand was raised. Go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, I think Lisa makes a really good point that, you know, I'm sure Lisa would agree with Mary about all those things, but the issue is that the resistance from some academics to non-traditional dissertations is that the logic doesn't necessarily kind of announce itself as such, or the argument doesn't announce itself as potentially as explicitly or in as conventional forms as academics might be used to. And one of the pieces that has always been very meaningful to me is this piece that Steve Ramsey and Jeffrey Rockwell wrote in Debates in Digital Humanities in 2012, where they were asking about differences between, say, writing a conventional academic argument and creating a digital humanities project. And what they posed is that what it really comes down to is having an argument. And I think thinking about the way these various projects that we've seen today they might not necessarily be structured with an argument in the same way. And I would even say that a way that goes beyond whether it's written or spoken, but just even in the way it's framed. And it does get down to the affect, the way they immerse people in experiences or the way they lead people through them, but they embody arguments. And the arguments that they embody are academic in the sense that they are in conversation with previous scholarship, and they advance them in really interesting ways.
Yeah, I would love to follow up, and I love that article, Matt. I'm glad you brought that up. One of the things I've been thinking about with mobile devices is, and I work in the gallery museum world, and there's this concept of BYOD, which is bring your own device. And essentially it's upending the kind of top-down dissemination of information and idea and thinking from the curator down to the visitor. And the same with my project was that I was thinking about how to make an experience that actually loaded the meaning and made that meaning making the actual user of the game's responsibility. I can tell you what's important, but I really think if we are to make connections to ideas into like existential meaning, that we have to do that on our own, and what's important to me is not important to the next person. And so I can provide you with a lot of information, which was the goal of my game, but the responsibility was for you to go out and experience it and make that meaning on your own. And mobile devices are a great tool because we have them on us to make meaning all the time now. So that was just it's kind of like thinking about your question, Lisa. It's just, I think it is the responsibility of the learner to make the meaning. And the more we can stop trying to dictate what the importance is of certain works of literature or whatever it is that we're studying, the better for the learner, because it will have more personal connection and it will have more profound meaning.
Yeah, Justin, you want to jump in? Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, sorry. I had to write, if you look at the dissertation, there's a preface, and that preface was for one particular community member who wasn't on board with this. This is already after I changed advisors, because that person was also not on board with this, but had to, it's like this was so sort of foreign to him. And it was like, and so I was able to, and I write about James Agee's Let Us Not Praise Famous Men, and the sort of dual mode that he explores in that book of like trying to tell someone's story while also not speaking for them in the way, but also in that speaking for them that is so difficult. And he talks about like all the things that he wished he could communicate within the text, the files of odors and these clumps of earth and all of these different kinds of things. And just that way of like translating this for someone. So it's not necessarily a question of affect, Lisa. It's more just like this, because it's not structured in the conventional way that Matt was talking about. It's just like it was sort of opaque to him, and that sort of got him over the hump. And then he was like all on board after that. But having to do that, and sometimes it's like, we think of these like convincing this huge bureaucracy that this is important, but for me, as long as I convinced my advisor who was on board, like that was the path through it. And so then you might have to work on some of your committee members, and I've, as other parts of this series and as this project, talking to friends of mine who have had to do that within their committee. And I will put that in the chat in a second, Sarah. So, but yeah, but just trying to figure out that level of translation that needs to happen, where that is necessary to sort of convert someone to your side and where you need to pitch that argument.
And that persuasion is, you know, part of academic work as well. You know, it's part of teaching, it's part of having a public impact. It helps us, I think, to clarify our arguments. But I just put this in the chat. It's so important to find the people who will support you and to at least have somebody who's got your back. If you're fighting an uphill battle on all fronts, that's what can really sink somebody's progress. So I don't want to dismiss that at all. Sonia, you had something you wanted to add.
Yeah, no, just real quick, going back a little bit to what Jesse was saying in terms of when you write a traditional monographic dissertation and a typical academic writing, in that the author is typically making the statement and making the point and telling others what the point is. And let me tell you what you should think. And then when you start incorporating multimodality, one of the things that I think I discovered in the process of producing my dissertation is that what is the value of the audio? And Anna Williams, she is also featured in the website NextGen. If you listen to her, one of the things she said was this idea that you're adding more to it. You're adding layers and layers, and all of these layers are contributing to the meaning making process. And when you listen to somebody talking, when you listen to each individual, you listen to their voice. If you watch Justin's video, when you're watching him walking through the streets of Ghana and you hear the sounds, it adds so much more value in information and meaning to what he's saying, that I don't think you could possibly do all of that just through writing. So it's not against writing, but just adding all these layers that contribute to the message and contribute to the meaning making. And I think that is invaluable. And that was something that I think I learned through the process of working through my dissertation.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you mentioned Anna's podcast. It's so good. I dropped a link into the chat. I'm sorry that Anna couldn't be here today, but this is the other thing, is when did you pick up somebody's dissertation to read it for pleasure? And for research maybe, but so much of this is just a delight to engage with. You know, it's fun and it's interesting, and that's what knowledge should be and can be. So that's something that really brings me a lot of hope and joy in thinking about these kinds of things. Now, there have been a couple of questions about practical matters, and I know that's always a concern in these types of discussions. One question was from Rob Townsend about the matter of finishing. You know, there's always a concern from advisors about, are you going to be able to finish in a timely way? This is a concern for any dissertation, I think, not only, you know, non-standard formats. But was this something that you all encountered in your work? And what would what kind of roadblocks did you hit? Did you feel like it was harder to finish the project you had set out for yourself than it would have been to finish a text-based dissertation? Do you feel like that's, I don't know, is that a relevant question to your project, or did it unfold differently? Yeah, Jesse, go ahead.
I have much to say on this, so I'll try to make it succinct. No. The project, which started as kind of like build out this walking tour, I realized that I had really taken on so much more, because I made the graphics, I built the websites to house all the information. I had to do all the research on all the locations. I recorded the audio for like these, you know, so you could listen to Whitman's poems in place. I created a script to, like, the game is based on it, kind of where you're trying to save Walt Whitman from a nefarious organization trying to wipe him out of human memory. So I built a script. So there was all these aspects, and I, you know, some had some experience in some and some in less than others. But even as like I built the game, the actual platform updated halfway through my dissertation, and it opened up a lot of possibilities. But it also made me have to go back and redo the game and build it again. And so there were a lot of these things. There were actual like obstacles, like literal roadblocks, because Brooklyn Heights is a neighborhood which is under such dramatic change right now that parts of the game that I scripted in to walk in certain paths, like a bridge had opened and then it was unstable. They closed the bridge. And part of the walking tour was to go over the bridge. So I had to rewrite it. Then they opened the bridge again, and then they closed it again. So it was like there was actual implications of place that were impacting what I was doing, plus the technology changing. And it was like, there were times when I definitely wanted to give up on this project. It took for me, it took such an immense lift. I felt at the end such a relief. It had become part of my life for almost 10 years as I was working full time. I was never just a student. I was always working full time. So those two obligations of like trying to work, go home, write, and deal with these unknowns and changes, it was very, I mean, when you start a project like this, I think you have to steel yourself to the fact that it's going to take more, and you're going to have to be a problem solver in different ways. And that's not scripted. Thank God for this project that you've put together here to, like, as Matt had said, like, documenting process, so important, because that's the part I think for me, there was no one to rely on. It was really just a learning as you go. So those obstacles were all new almost to the field, or they haven't been communicated widely amongst, you know, in academia, so that we have that knowledge base to start from. So
yeah, Kate, you want to jump in?
Yeah, so can I just add, I feel like, I know there are competitive dissertation fellowships, but I just feel like everybody, regardless of Ivy, state schools, whatever, we should all have 1 year dedicated to the dissertation without any teaching duties, because that made a huge difference for me. In my 3rd year, I think I was convinced I will never finish, because drawing is very time intensive. And I was teaching myself how to draw, how to do data visualization, all of these new skills. And it was very rewarding, but it was also very time intensive. And I was convinced I wouldn't finish. And then luckily I got the Mellon HCLS fellowship, which let me kind of like take time off teaching, which I love, but that time essentially helped me finish. And I wouldn't have without it. And those fellowships are very, very competitive. I just don't think like people should have to compete for those fellowships in order to have a shot at finishing on time, you know? So yeah, that's just as my 2 cents, I guess.
It's amazing how material resources are often like cast aside in this conversation, but it's essential. If people don't have like the conditions in which to work properly, how can you finish the work? I totally agree. Justin, go ahead.
Yeah, I knew after my prelims that I didn't want to go into like a traditional academic job. So I'm now like, I did a clear postdoc and now work at the University of Michigan Library. But, and so I was like, I don't need to get this thing published. Like, okay, cool, let's do something else. But at the same time, it was also like, I did all of the sort of the trips for the film during my grad program. And so I was like thinking about the documentary being structured, and then also like editing. I found one of the things I found out during this process was editing is my brain likes to edit more than it likes to write, and writing is a huge source of anxiety for me. And so being able to remove things from larger blocks of footage versus writing something on a blank page, if I had to write a traditional, like there were points in like, oh, it'd be so much easier if I just like picked 4 songs and the deep musical analysis of them and just like get it done. But I wouldn't have finished. I would have quit because it wouldn't have been interesting enough. And I would just be like, oh, this is just, you know, I know we all talk about done being better than good, but that seriously would have been just like not interesting. And so trying to get myself over the line. So I think I wrote most of this in like a month holed up in northern Minnesota. Just like get it done and get it over the line. But having the building blocks of the media to hang the text on versus the other way around was crucial to making that happen. And I was lucky to have a job. So shout out to Rebecca Moss in the digital content library, where it was technically a fellowship. Going back to the labor and resources question, it was technically a fellowship, but we were supposed to work 20 hours a week, but we could bank hours by working earlier, but then still get paid every 2 weeks. So that's how I could do these production trips. Like no other way I could do that if I was teaching in a conventional RA GSI position. So like that made this whole thing possible. That's why she's listed as an associate producer on the film.
Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I want to say just a couple of things. One is that I think we really see from all of these dissertators how much resilience it takes to produce these kind of unconventional dissertations, having to work from around all kinds of obstacles, whether they're technical or expertise related there, and just that as advisors, we one of the things we're not used to taking account of and valuing is like those different kinds of knowledges, like and like what it means, say, for Kay to visualize, climate change and social justice in the New York City subway, that creativity, that artistic sense, that that type of argument. I think as academics, we need to open ourselves up to that. And I saw that with Jesse. I mean, the platform, just as he said, it totally changed. He had to rewrite the whole entire thing. But I do think we also need to talk, at least for a moment here, about what was necessary on an institutional level. And I just wanted to mention that, when Jesse decided that he really wanted to make the digital portion of the dissertation the central part of it, we went in to see the chair of the department to make sure that he was on board and that we got the kind of official okay, and we followed it up, to get it in email. But I'll never forget the meeting, because I went in there going to talk to this very serious Shakespeare scholar, Mario De Gangi, and to his chair of the doctoral program to talk about this project. And Jesse spoke about what he was planning to do. And Mario pulled out his phone and was like, "Oh, I love digital games." And he started talking to us about this game he played. And he sort of like, we started talking, engaging with the idea of what a mobile experience could look like as a dissertation. And so this, I saw something in the chat about worrying about dissertation anxiety, and sometimes people are more open to these possibilities than we might expect. But I just want to say also other factors that I think helped make Jesse's dissertation possible was the fact that we had a community of digital experimentation at the Graduate Center through GC Digital Initiatives, and also that we had a library that was thinking very in a forward-thinking way about how a digital dissertation could be deposited and how it could be supported along the way. So just wanted to say our appreciation for that. And then finally, I just want to note that at the end of it, Jesse, I really pushed him to write a more conventional white paper and a text-based white paper, because I did get very worried that the whole experience wouldn't translate. And Jesse, to his credit, pulled that through. He sort of concretized the experience in the written form, still refused to submit anything on paper, made it a completely digital dissertation by entering it into the website. But I still, even as an advisor, as someone who had been behind him the whole way, still worried at the end, will there be resistance to this thing? And so, I think that's, in my experience as someone working in digital humanities, there is often that sort of element of double or triple work where, you do the thing, but then you've got to write the thing, explaining the thing. And, I do hope that one day we are past that, although I admit to being part of something keeping it moving forward.
We're coming into our last minutes, and I know, Kay, you had your hand raised, and Mary and Sonia. No, you didn't? Okay. Mary, go ahead, and then Sonia.
Yes, I think, we as academics have a huge responsibility, not just to be vanguards and for you guys to be vanguards, but in our course, you have to start before you get onto your dissertation. So in the actual courses, and Sonia can speak to this, we require it's actually a requirement. You get graded to the degree to which you experiment with multimodality and include it in meaning making, one. And two, we actually created a methods course on interpretation, parsing multimodal meaning. So we do have to intervene with these kinds of tools ourselves to open up these possibilities to all our students. But Matthew's right, we have to do a double job in convincing the examiners, convincing the system, because we're in this transitional moment. No one's ever going back to alphabetical literacy as the only way of making meaning, not in medicine. There are journals now in medicine, in engineering, which are multimodal. The world is changing dramatically, but the canons of the academy are a bit, or not a bit, they're enormously rigid. So Matthew, we are exemplars as academics, in trying to create the conditions as well as supporting these adventurous and smart graduate students.
Sonia, go ahead.
And I guess I just wanted to add a couple of words about passion. And I can't speak for anybody else, and I can't compare it with anything else because I only wrote my one multimodal dissertation. But one thing that I felt, and I don't know if the other colleagues here, once you embark in this journey, it becomes part of you. And the level of passion that I now have for the topic and for the process of going through it, I don't think I would have been able to do it if I had not embarked in this multimodal journey. So I think once you embrace the idea of multimodality, whether you're doing comics or whether you're doing video or whether you're doing mobile device gaming as part of your dissertation, it becomes part of you. And then to some degree, I dare to say that you can't give up. You come to a point where it really is embedded in you and your work and in your life, and then you can't give up. You have to continue. Having said that, for anyone and everyone on the call, if you are in the process of even beginning and thinking of starting something like this, I do highly encourage everyone to think in terms of what are your goals in terms of job prospects in future. I'm with Justin in that my job does not hinder on my ability to publish in academically recognized and peer-reviewed journals. I created my own blog at work so that I can publish multimodality. So that is also a consideration that everyone needs to keep in mind. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are coming right up to time. There's so much more that we could talk about, and it's amazing to me how these sessions always just feel so rich and abundant, and like we could just keep talking. I saw some questions earlier in the chat about how to stay in touch. There's a sense that people would like to be able to hear more from one another about the kinds of things that you've encountered, the kinds of challenges that you all might be facing, or the victories that you have in working through your projects. I would recommend, others may know of other resources, and you're welcome to drop them into the chat as well. I think maybe the best places to go to find these kinds of communities right now are probably Humanities Commons and maybe Haystack. I've put both of those links in the chat. Both of those spaces have groups related to digital scholarship, to different career pathways, to dissertations. So you can kind of poke around there, and both are free. You can see what sparks your interest. I've been gathering people under the umbrella of InkCap Collective to talk about like how we might rethink graduate education more broadly. So not only about dissertations, but if you're interested in thinking about some of the systems and structures of higher education, I would welcome you to be a part of that space as well. Thank you all so much, everybody who joined us in speaking today. You are all it's so wonderful to hear your wisdom and your experiences. Thank you to Glenn and Teresa for co-sponsoring this event, and for Anna for coming and bringing your expertise as well. And huge thanks to everybody who came and participated in the conversation. It really has felt incredibly dynamic and vibrant and hopeful, I think. So thank you all very much. Glenn or Teresa, I don't know if you have any last words you want to jump in with.
Well, I think we should all take a moment to express appreciation for Katina Rogers for doing such a fantastic job hosting this event. It's, we're up on around 10 speakers here, and I know from many years of having, running grad programs being my shtick that's a challenge. So she did a fantastic job, and I just want to thank Teresa Mangum for being co-host on this event, and I want to encourage everyone to go and check out that website, the Next Gen Dis at Humanities Commons. If you have, maybe you just went there and took a look, but spend some time with it. There's lots of great stuff there, and give us your feedback. You can actually give us feedback right on the site. We want to know what you think, what you're really finding helpful, what we could add to it or other ways that we could improve the site. And also, if you are, as I know at least a couple of people who were here for this event, apparently are also non-monographic dissertators yourselves, please get in touch with me. And we can have a conversation, maybe do a little interview and add your projects to the site as well. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming, and especially our presenters and Katina and Teresa.
Thank you for a wildly inspirational day from me too. This has just been fabulous. Thank you all.